October 21, 2024 regular meeting of the Union County Board of Commissioners to order. At this time, I would like to recognize Vice Chairman Brian Helms for the invocation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you're so inclined, please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we just want to thank you, Lord. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. Lord, obviously we've got decisions to be made as a board tonight, and I pray for your guidance, and more importantly, Lord, that your will be done so that we can provide a service to the people. Lord, I pray for all of my colleagues sitting up here on this board that you would give us the guidance required to make the best decisions possible. And Lord, I ask these things in your name. Amen.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is informal comments from the community. Each speaker must address the board from the lectern and begin their remarks by giving their name, stating whether they are residents of Union County, indicating the municipality within which they reside, if any. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to make remarks. A tone may sound at the conclusion of your remarks. A speaker may not yield any of his or her time to another speaker. Speakers may not discuss matters which are the subject of public hearings, and they must be courteous in their language and presentation. Restatements or repetitive comments by the same speaker, whether at the same or separate meetings, may be ruled out of order and terminated by the chair. Personal attacks will not be tolerated. Speakers may leave written comments and or supporting documents, if any, with the clerk to the board. Our first speaker is Carolyn Burrows.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Carolyn Burrows, and I live in the Alton community. And haven't been here for a little while, but I wanted to come back and just tell you that I heard that some of the recent water lines that are going to be laid are completing the 2022 project. And so I'm glad to know that that's about to finish. And so I'm making a request again that you reopen the application process for the short water line program. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any other speakers who have not signed up who wish to speak? Come on up, ma'am.
I'm Betty Nance, and I live in Wingate, North Carolina, and I'm here with the Russell rezoning, and I'm Betty Nance. As I mentioned at the last 2 meetings, this rezoning will affect my family, and in the future, I ask the commissioners to deny this rezoning. Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is a public hearing regarding text amendments to section 60.170C Stormwater Management of the county's Unified Development Ordinance. I will open the public hearing and recognize Lee Jensen, Planning Director, for comments.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, Board. This is a text amendment, and it's coming before you because it was one of the strategies that was recommended in the Union County 2050 comprehensive plan. When the comprehensive plan was adopted back in 2021, it contained several strategies that would help implement the vision of that plan. Subsequent to that, the board appointed several committees that came up with some implementation strategies. And what you're looking at here on the screen right now are the strategies that were put forth by the Stormwater Committee. And you can see the kind of the fourth one down here: include 50-year storm event for developments required to regulate post-construction runoff, and the next one down: regulate post-development runoff rates on any development exceeding either 1 acre of disturbance or a 1/4 acre of impervious surface. So those are the two that we're talking about tonight. Currently, and I'm going to bring up our actual, this is the actual text change. Currently, our stormwater management is everything that you see here minus the red underlined portions. So right now, we only require stormwater on cluster-style subdivisions. So when you have like a property and you're able to reduce those lot sizes down, you're not getting any more density, but you can reduce the lot sizes down. They're required in cluster subdivisions, and we only require detention to the 25-year storm event. And you can also see that last sentence is being taken out there. Currently, you don't have to detain stormwater if you're discharging directly to a FEMA-regulated floodplain. What this is going to change to, if you approve it, would be, number one, it would apply to all development types, just not cluster subdivisions, so it would apply to all subdivisions, commercial and commercial development. It would apply to all development exceeding 1 acre of land disturbance or a 1/4 acre of impervious surface. And then you would, instead of the 25-year storm, you would detain to the 50-year storm event. And that last sentence would be removed. So you would detain stormwater everywhere, not just if you're, you would take out the allowance to discharge directly to a FEMA regular floodplain. Again, this did come straight from the Union County 2050 Comprehensive Plan. This was a recommendation from the committee. So we're just bringing you back the text tonight that would amend the ordinance to help implement that committee recommendation. This did go to the planning board at their August meeting, and the planning board gave a unanimous recommendation in favor of adopting this amendment. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Jensen? Mr. County Manager?
And I would just ask if the board is willing, since we have no opposition, we did have a unanimous a request for approval from the Land Use Board, that the board consider adding this to the agenda for action tonight. Obviously, that's your decision, but we'd ask that you consider that.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Not really a question, but more of a comment. You know, when we first looked at these committee recommendations, I think that, you know, there was a fair amount of consensus on the board that, you know, in regards to stormwater, we have to make some kind of change. You know, obviously we've got areas of the county that have been severely impacted, you know, by rain events, and so, you know, moving this from, you know, 25 to 50 really just kind of gives us more of a consistent requirement that I feel like is needed. So thank you, Lee, for bringing this to us, and you know, I would certainly support moving this to business.
No one signed up to speak at the public hearing. Is anyone here that hasn't signed up that wishes to be heard on this public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, you may wish to close the public hearing then at this time.
I'll now close the public hearing. The next item is consideration of the agenda and consent agenda. Are there any motions regarding requested revisions or amendments to either the consent agenda or the business agenda?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got two additions to the business agenda. The first one is that I would like to make a motion that the board add consideration of a resolution of support for the Town of Waxhaw's application for the CRTPO grant program for the Helms Road Extension Project. And if we need to vote on these separately, we certainly can. Mr. Cade, is that what you would recommend?
I think that's fine if that's the way you wish to handle it.
Okay. So that would be the first item, and then I have a second item in regards to the text amendment that we just heard. So if we need to vote on those separately.
We'll vote on them separately. Go ahead.
Okay. The second item would be to add item number 24-657. That would be the text amendment or to the Unified Development Ordinance of Union County, North Carolina, and that would be TXT 2024-001 regarding stormwater.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion indicate by aye. Aye. Do you have another one, Mr. Vice Chair?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman. That was the two items.
You had- The resolution was the first one, and then the last item regarding the event, text
The text
amendment.
amendment. Yes, sir.
All right.
The way those items were presented, they were voted on as a singular motion. So that's the only vote that you need to take.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Vice Chair.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Any discussion? All in favor indicate by aye. Aye. We are now at the business portion of our agenda. The first item of business is item 24-671, the Home and Community Care Block Grant Committee Report. I will recognize Andrew Friend, Executive Director of the Union County Council on Aging, for this item.
Good evening, Commissioners. I have some handouts for you, just some materials to take back with you. Is somebody going to be able to pull up the presentation? Or I sent it to Lynn West.
I don't see it.
My apologies.
I don't see it on here.
Yes. It's in the agenda. Sorry, I should have checked first.
It's okay. It'll take me a minute. This night, the agenda packet. Will it be in the full agenda packet? Full agenda packet? Okay, it'll just take a minute. It'll be the full agenda packet, right? Here, and then. I just downloaded that already too.
This one?
No, here. I think I've got it.
Was this emailed to me?
No, it wasn't. You're good. Presentation. Okay. I was looking under the agenda packet.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, you're welcome.
See if I can present. Perfect. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Andrew Friend, and I have the pleasure of serving our community as the Executive Director of Council on Aging in Union County. We're a nonprofit that helps older adults stay independent for as long as possible. Today, I'm here representing the Home and Community Care Block Grant committee. And with me today, I have a whole bunch of our committee members. If you could all just wave your hands up in the air. I have Karen Norwood, our Operations Director at Council on Aging, Stephanie Starr, the Union County Director of Community and Support and Outreach, Patrick Chang, who is a appointed citizen, Sir Luda Anthony, who's a City of Monroe Councilwoman, Patricia Kinley, who's a Town of Fairview Councilwoman, and Debbie Lee, who's the Assistant Director of our local area agency on aging, and I can't forget B. Colson, who is a appointed citizen, former principal in our community. So the Home and Community Care Block Grant Committee is a county commissioner appointed committee. It's responsible for planning the aging service system in our county. We do this by allocating home and community care block grant funds to programs that serve older adults. We identify funding sources outside of the block grant funds. We determine the needs of older adult residents to help them maintain their independence. We identify resources and service gaps. We promote awareness through public education, and we analyze service and demographic data to project current and future needs of the older adults in our community. Commissioners, I want to begin by talking about some alarming statistics. This data is compiled by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services through their Division of Aging and Adult Services from their aging profile in Union County. The state puts one of these aging profiles for every county in our state, and in your packet that I handed out, you have a full aging profile for our county. But I wanted to zone in on this specific chart here. The purple column on the left, that's 2022. That's just about where we are today. The orange column in the middle is the projected population growth in the next 20 years. The teal column on the far right is the percent change over the next 20 years. I'd first like to point out the population of those under the age of 60, which are those outside of that red line. That population over the next 20 years is projected to grow 30 to 40-ish%. Look into the first line in the red box, please. That's the 60-plus-year-old population, which is growing twice as fast as anybody under the age of 60. The 65-plus-year-old population, which is included in that 60-plus population, is growing 3 times as fast. And most alarming of all is our 85-year-old plus population in our county, which is growing 6 times faster than any population under the age of 60. Out of 100 counties in our state, Union County ranks second for the greatest growth in the 65-plus-year-old population out of 100 counties. And the 85-plus-year-old population, growing at an astonishing 264%, is the most concerning to our committee because those are the people that are going to need our services the most. While right now the 85-year-old plus population makes up only 1% of our county population, they're about 25% of the population that our agencies through this block grant serve. So just to look at another graph here to kind of also highlight the population, this slide shows 20 years back and 20 years forward. If you look to about 2002, there were much more children than older adults. And think about what we were doing in Union County 20 years ago. We were figuring out ways to meet the rapidly growing population that we're moving to this community. Not only the population, but the population of children. We were building schools and figuring out ways of how we're going to serve those children. Now we're at a time where we have, just in the middle of this chart, the same number of older adults as we do children. This means we have just about the same amount of retired people in our community as we do children in our schools. And if you look forward to the next 20 years, the population of older adults is projected to by far surpass the population of children. Now, our committee wants to be clear that we do believe that children do need attention and support, but we want our community to be prepared to meet the needs of the older adults in our county. Our HCCBG committee is encouraging leaders to focus on the needs of older adults. We want to build a stronger foundation of supportive programs so that we are well prepared to accommodate the needs of our older neighbors in this county. So what is the Home and Community Care Block Grant, or also referred to as HCCBG? It's funding for non-Medicaid home and community-based services to help older adults remain independent and prevent them from moving into a nursing home or any long-term care. I'll tell you, it costs far less to keep somebody safe in their homes than it does to have to move them into long-term care. And besides that, people don't want to move into long-term care if they don't have to. They want to maintain and stay in their homes that they've built and lived in their entire lives. So the block grant consists of federal fundings from the Older Americans Act at about 45%. The state contributes 45%, and the local counties are required to contribute at least 10%. We do want to gratefully acknowledge that Union County does contribute more than that 10% from some of our counties, so we do thank you, Union County, for that. In total, our block grant consists of almost $1.3 million to split between 3 agencies, not including the additional support that the county gives. Union County receives nearly $717,000. Council on Aging receives $544,000, and the Bazemore Active Adult Center receives nearly $23,000. So I want to also talk a little bit about the services specifically of where that funding goes. There's 3 different agencies that receive this funding, as I mentioned. Let's talk first about Union County government. Through the Senior Nutrition Program, the program provides home-delivered meals, or also commonly known as Meals on Wheels, to nearly 300 homebound older adults and serves hundreds of people in our community at congregate meal sites. The meal sites are a place for seniors to receive hot lunch and a meal 5 times a week while they can socialize and stay active. Sadly, this program has over 500 people on their waiting list to receive home-delivered meals. Transportation program provides transportation to seniors who still live in their homes but cannot drive because of their decline in physical cognitive abilities. While the Home and Community Care Block Grant does not fund all of the transportation in this county, but it does receive some funding where they're currently serving over 559 clients. County also receives HCCBG funding to pay for admission into adult daycare and currently has 20 clients that they're serving, with 4 on a waiting list. And in addition, the county receives funding to subcontract with a private home care agency to provide in-home services. County currently has 14 in-home clients with 33 on a waiting list. Second agency to receive services is Council on Aging. Our biggest program at Council on Aging is in-home services. The difference between us and the county is that we have our own home care license and we can provide these services directly. We're currently serving 254 people and unfortunately have 176 people on a waiting list for services. Our group respite program is a day program for families who are caring for their loved ones with memory loss, currently serving about 25 families per week. And then our volunteer program development funding is used to coordinate volunteers to help seniors keep up with their homes and help with building wheelchair ramps, installing grab bars in bathrooms, doing yard work for seniors and those things, serving about 300 people each year. And finally, the third agency is the City of Monroe Parks and Rec, where they receive funding for the Bazemore Active Adult Center. They applied for funding so that they could actually eliminate the membership fee for folks that live in our county that are not City of Monroe residents. So every Union County senior can join the Bazemore Active Adult Center at no cost. And they have over 1,100 members. If you haven't been to the new Bazemore Center, I certainly encourage you to check it out. It's remarkable. Okay, so based on our program's waiting list, our committee has determined the 2 greatest needs are for in-home services and for home-delivered meals, which both programs serve the most vulnerable seniors in our community. Oftentimes, the volunteer delivering these meals or the in-home aide providing care are the only person that these homebound seniors are seeing all week. Senior Nutrition Program provides home-delivered meals to, as I mentioned, about 300 people with 5 meals per week, but unfortunately has 529 people on a waiting list to receive services. There are more people on the waiting list for this service, almost by 1.5 than people that are actually able to be served, which equates to about a $1 million shortfall when you calculate 5 meals per week, 52 weeks per year, $7.10 per meal times 525 people, which is nearly $1 million. That also does not include the $100,000 deficit that's projected this year for the nutrition program, solely because of if they keep the current caseload, solely because of the rising food and labor costs that are associated with that. Second, greatest need of our community is our in-home services, where we provide personal care and household chore assistance to older adults. So unfortunately, Medicare does not cover home care like custodial care. So unless you have a very low income and qualify for Medicaid, you have to otherwise pay out of pocket for these services, which is nearly $40 per hour. So between Council on Aging and DSS, we're serving 268 people per week with in-home services, but unfortunately have 209 people on a waiting list, just about the same amount of people on a waiting list almost than that we're able to serve with this program. It would cost nearly $850,000 to eliminate our waiting list when you would consider one in-home aide could cover 15 clients. And if you do the math, that's not much care that each client is getting, but just the bare minimum. With a couple registered nurses, that would cost about $850,000. So this graph here shows the past 20-year history with our block grant funding, and this is for the state of North Carolina, not specifically for Union County. The yellow line shows the change in population of the 60-plus-year-old population, and the purple lines indicate the change in funding each year, which has been adjusted to account for inflation. Our committee is concerned because, as you can see, each year that goes by after you adjust for inflation, it's as if we're receiving less funding from this block grant at a time when we have record population of growth for our older adult population. So here's the hard truth. Our waiting lists are the highest they've ever been in our 50-year history of providing services. Our clients are waiting over a year to receive services. These are folks that are in their 70s, their 80s, their 90s. Some of them don't have years to wait for these services. They need these services now. And I'll tell you, the hardest part of our job is when a client finally makes it off the waiting list. And we call to offer services. And the family answers the phone. And they say, "I'm sorry, but you're too late. Mom either had to move into a nursing home or, even worse, Mom passed away." The senior nutrition program does check-ins with their folks on the waiting list. 529 people. At their last check-in, they found over 30 people had passed away. Commissioners, we're not able to serve these people who need us the most in the last years of their lives. The older adult population is growing at unprecedented rates, and it's not tapering off. It's not growing and then it's just going to stop growing. It's going to continue to grow each year. And if we don't do something, we're going to continue to grow our waiting lists, and we're not going to be able to meet the needs of these older folks in our community. Our clients are the people who built this community to be the great community that it is. These are our bus drivers. These are our school teachers. These are our store clerks, even county workers that we're serving now with these services. One of our clients worked in the former mill in Waxhaw that they converted into those high-end apartments, and the irony is that she could never afford to live in one of those apartments there. So we're working with our local area agency on aging to advocate for additional funding at the state and federal level, but our block grant got a measly $8,000 increase this past year that we had to split between 3 agencies. On behalf of our committee, we are asking for additional support. We're asking for support in many ways, any way that you can help us continue to meet the needs or try to meet the needs of these older adults. And I'll open it up for any questions or suggestions. And with me today, I have Debbie Lee from our local area agency on aging, and Stephanie Starr can answer any questions about the nutrition program.
Commissioner Merrill.
Well, first off, thank you so much for being here tonight and publicly presenting what I consider a crisis. I had the privilege of meeting you 2 or 3 years ago, and 2 or 3 years ago, we knew it was coming. The numbers were there, and here we are. And I don't have any questions other than just to say thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. You know, people talk about the greatest generation and our military veterans who have served our country, but we can never forget those that have served our communities and, like you said, may not even be able to afford in-home services or meals in their golden years. So I just want to say thank you for being the voice for a very important need. I think we should all, really let this data sink in, because we do need to figure out a way to take care of our senior citizens. And again, thank you very much for everything you do.
Thank you, Commissioner Merrill.
And I know thank yous are not enough, but it gives us the information that we need to figure out what can be done. Because, this is hemorrhaging. And, the thoughts of making phone calls to take someone off of a wait list, and 30 of those had passed away. I can't imagine making that phone call. So not only thank you, but giving us the tools and the data and the information we need to take care of Union County taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Friend? Commissioner Ball?
Yes, sir. Out of curiosity, do you ever have any contributions from corporate contributions or from private individuals?
Yes, I know through Council on Aging speaking specifically, it's a little bit easier for us to fundraise than the county would be for the nutrition program, for example. But we've done several fundraisers. We've the funding for our in-home services, about half comes from the block grant. The other half we fundraise. We do boots on the ground fundraising. And in addition, we do ask our clients for contributions to these services as well, which generates a little bit of funding as well. But we get corporate support, private foundation support, but as you saw the numbers, Commissioner Balcom, it's just, we cannot keep up with the demand. And we're asking our local, our state, and our federal government for more funding so that we can take care of these people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, speaking of the grant funding, we definitely need to make sure that you're working with the 8th Congressional District Office here in Monroe to continually do searches through the congressional search engines on grants that would help our community. Because I believe you said Union County was number 2 in the state. So we definitely need to put you in contact with the office in DC and do some additional grant searches that maybe would help with these top 2 priorities. So let's make sure we circle back on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Friend, thank you so much for your presentation.
Appreciate it.
The next matter of business is item 24-699, 2025 reappraisal and receipt of the 2025 schedule of values. I'll recognize Van Harold, Tax Administrator, concerning this item.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, Board. Appreciate the time to be here tonight. I will do my best to adhere to the rule of 3 minutes. So we're here regarding the 2025 reappraisal. We had a couple of presentations earlier this year. I think over the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've done 4 community meetings, various municipalities. This is not what you've heard before. There's a slide or 2 that may look familiar. But this is all about the process and where we're at. This slide here, you've heard this a couple of times. I'm just going to gloss over it. What is the purpose of the reappraisal and why are we doing it now? We're on a 4-year reappraisal cycle. The last reappraisal was 2021. The market has shifted significantly since then. So it is time for us to realign the tax values with current market values, which is why we're here, and that's a statutory mandate. So what's included in the reappraisal process? All real property in the county, residential, commercial, industrial, land, and structures. Excluded, that's the next slide, but what is our goal is to bring it to fair market value, which is defined as the most probable price a buyer and seller would be willing to exchange the property for. The effective date of the reappraisal is January 1st, 2025. What is excluded, that is not part of this. They are valued annually by staff in our office. Motor vehicles are also valued annually. That is a partnership between us and the Department of Motor Vehicles. Taxes are paid when you do your registration there. The third category is all public utility companies. They are assessed at the state level, so we do not value those locally in the office here. How do we do this? Through a process called mass appraisal. The process is just appraising properties, groups of properties across the county based on sales data that we've accumulated over the last 4 years, cost of construction materials, and various resources that we pull together to build this schedule of values. Our tools, we use a lot of software, a lot of statistical analysis. We've got a highly qualified staff of appraisers that use those tools and work through the data methodically to come up with property values throughout the county. In this process, we do adhere to the 3 standard approaches to value: sales approach, cost approach, and income approach for business type properties. So what is the Uniform Schedule of Values? It basically describes the methodology and procedures for appraisal at market value. Provides summaries and broad ranges of parameters in our schedules that we input into our CAMA system, which just stands for Computer Assisted Mass Appraisal. And that applies against all the characteristics of your property and gives us an estimated value for your property based on current sales data. The Schedule of Values establishes the base rates and ranges for all types of property, which will be in effect for the next 4 years. So we've been on both sides of this scenario. If the market goes up, we're underassessed. If the market goes down, we may be slightly overassessed between that cycle, and then we adjust accordingly. It also includes the adjustments that may be used for various types of construction, adjustments for market conditions, and the various valuation schedules for land values throughout the county. To the right here, the image here is the cover of the book. I believe each of you received a copy of the Schedule of Values in your agenda packet. They were rather lengthy documents. There's 2 separate documents. One is for residential property, all real property. One is strictly for agricultural purposes. So what is our adoption schedule? Tonight is the first formal step in this whole reappraisal process that we've been working on for 2 years. We are simply presenting you the Schedule of Values. We will be asking you to direct the clerk to put a notice of publication out on the 23rd regarding the public hearing, which is scheduled for November 4th. Following that public hearing, another 2-week waiting period, we will bring the schedule back up for adoption on November 18th. And then November 20th, we'll begin the statutory advertising period. We have to advertise for 4 consecutive weeks as an appeal window for people that may see something that they want to contest. If that happens, it goes to the Property Tax Commission in Raleigh, and that has to be settled before we can move forward with the reappraisal. So it usually does not happen. I don't anticipate it now, but it is a possibility. But the last date to appeal the Schedule of Value to the State Property Tax Commission is December 20th. Kind of picking up from where we are on a reappraisal schedule through the rest of this fall, early part of next year, we'll continue to perform additional market analysis and property analysis and quality control work. We'll continue to do community outreach throughout the county. I think we currently have, like I said, we've completed 4 meetings. I think we have 4 or 5 more scheduled. We're continuing to work various civic organizations, private organizations, public boards to speak to whoever we can get in front of just to get the message out. We will come back to the board in late February, early March with the results. Overall, not individual property, because we won't discuss individual property care issues in the public meeting, but we'll present to you as a county, here's where the values have moved to. We'll do the same thing for every municipality in the county as well. We anticipate the Board of Equalization and Review convening on April 24th, which will be the first formal meeting of that board to hear appeals from taxpayers. During the time of notices going out and that board convening, we will work appeals at the informal level and settle everything we can with taxpayers. If they don't like the decisions we come up with, they have that right to appeal to the board. And then during that period, the board has the final say on all matters. May 22nd would be the anticipated adjournment date from accepting new appeals. From the to the Board of Equalization and Review that gives people roughly 90 days to appeal their value from the time their notices go out, which is pretty standard operating procedure with counties throughout the state. That board will continue to meet through the end of 2025. Back in 21, you anticipate an appeal rate in a reappraisal year of 10%. In 2021, we had a little under 5% appeal rate, and less than 10% of that went to the Board of Equalization and Review. So we do a pretty good job of clearing them out, working with taxpayers, and the board does a good job of hearing those. I think we had between 4 and 8 that went to the Property Tax Commission from the board. So we do a good job of handling things locally, and I would anticipate the same this year. Before we go into this slide, I want to introduce some staff members. You want to come up? They weren't expecting this. These are the brains behind the operation. Michael Thompson's our Deputy Tax Administrator. You've met him previously. Brad is he's been with the county 27 years. He is our interim appraisal revaluation manager. And Jody is one of our supervisors in the office and one of our primary data analysts as well. So they have worked together to put this document together, and I just want to recognize them for their work. Thank you. So requested board action tonight. One, just simply receive the schedule. And if you have any questions, please let us know. The second item would be to schedule a public hearing during the regularly scheduled meeting on November 4th. And then the third item would be to direct the clerk to advertise the public hearing beginning October 23rd in the Inquirer Journal. With that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Any questions for the tax administrator?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Van, first of all, let me say that if you ever need some reading to fall asleep to, and I mean this in the best way possible, obviously there was at least a couple hundred pages that we had in our agenda packet, and I did take the time to go through that. What I'll say is that it's incredibly detailed, and the amount of effort to put something like that together to me is astonishing, and that's a compliment to you and your team.
Thank you.
Some numbers that stuck out to me as I was reviewing that is that, you know, what was in our agenda packet was 113,000 properties, 750 neighborhoods. That's a lot. I mean, this is not a light undertaking that you and your team are going through. You know, I just wanted to say that I appreciate the effort that you guys have gone through to do this. One thing that I think is important to understand, and you touched on this, maybe you can explain it a little bit further, but North Carolina statute requires us to do this every 8 years.
That's correct.
But Union County has a policy for every 4 years.
That's correct.
And if I understand correctly, and you know, please feel free to add to this, that is to try to keep things more balanced, if you will. Is that more?
That is the primary purpose. So we have been kind of been all over the board over the last 20 years. So in 2004, we did a reappraisal in 2000, 2004, 2008. 4-year cycle was established back then. We all know what happened after 2008. Bottom fell out of the market. Values went upside down. We ended up doing a 7-year reappraisal. So we were 2008 to 2015. By 2015, it had pretty much gone back to the levels that it was in 2008. We had very little change in the reappraisal that year. I was appointed in 2017. We went to the board because we saw where the numbers were headed, asked about doing a 4-year, and they said, not now. And so we ended up with a 6-year cycle. We triggered the statute again, did a 2021 reappraisal. As soon as that one was over, because that one we had a 36% increase countywide, I went to the board that August and said, we need to move to a 4-year cycle. It's what fits for this size county, and that's what every county like us around North Carolina or bigger is doing. Some are moving to 3-year cycles. I think the 4-year right now is a sweet spot where so that it's enough time. It gives us, like you said, it's a large undertaking. This is not something we can pull off overnight unless we triple our office size, which we're not talking about doing that. But it's one of those things that it does take time, and we have to gather data. We have to have market data. And 4 years gives us that time, so if it goes down, we can grab it and move forward. If it continues to increase, which is what has happened this time, we can do the same thing without it getting completely out of control. But our job is to reflect the market regardless of where it's at during that cycle.
So I think it's safe to assume that we do this, and this is really intended for the general public, but we do this to avoid those big swings in one direction versus the other when it comes to values. And so, I just wanted to clarify that, because I think a lot of folks maybe, look at this and think, okay, well, the county's, trying to, reassess property values because we want to, play around with tax rates or what have you. We really, in all honesty, we try to do this to try to avoid those big swings, to provide some regularity to the values of properties.
That's correct. That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Any further questions for Mr. Harrell? Mr. Harrell, I second what the vice chair said about your team and all the work it takes to get that done. I mean, I can't imagine, but I'm glad y'all do.
Thank you. Thank you.
With that, I'll make a motion that in item 24-699, that the requested information be done. The requested actions be taken that's requested in item 24-699. Any discussion on that? All in favor, indicate by aye. Aye. The next item on the agenda is item 24-720, the rezoning petition of 2024 RZ 009 Russell. I will recognize Bjorn Hansen, Senior Planner, concerning this item.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Manager Matthews. This is a follow-up from the board meeting 2 weeks ago where a public hearing was conducted on this rezoning. Again, this is a straight rezoning request. There's no conditions or site plan associated with it. It's approximately 25 acres just east of our transfer station on Austin Cheney Road. It's a request to rezone from RA 40 to RA 200, which is a down zoning. And this is the site. There previously was a small reclamation landfill on the site, otherwise 2-lane road. You can see the county facility across the street. And tonight you're being requested to approve or deny this rezoning request. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Hanson?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chair.
If there's no questions, I'll go ahead and offer a motion that the board deny the proposed amendment. So that would be to deny rezoning petition RZ 2024-009 submitted by Benjamin Russell to rezone the property appearing on the tax map as parcel 09040-017 in the Monroe Township from RA 40 to RA 200, and 2, adopt the consistency and reasonable statement for denial.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I would just like, for public record, again, the Land Use Board met and reviewed this as well, and they unanimously recommended that this be denied, so I will be supporting the motion.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion indicate by aye.
Aye.
The next matter of business is item 24-701, contribution of $413,000 to the North Carolina Department of Transportation project at NC 84 in Potter Road. I will again recognize Bjorn Hansen for this item.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. This is NCDOT's presentation, it was presented last week to the Village of Wesley Chapel, and I modified it slightly, but otherwise it's essentially the same presentation. So, we're talking about NC80 Form Potter. This was funded several years ago for a roundabout project. It was funded with money provided by NCDOT and Union County as the application to CARTPO to get the remainder of the money to fund it. Our money came as a contribution from the Crestwinds age-restricted development at Willoughby and Potter. That was a condition of the rezoning. It was approximately $386,000. We committed that funding to this intersection, and it was funded. And so the project has been moving ahead. Since that time, there was some reevaluation of the intersection as a part of traffic impact analyses for nearby developments, including the Dixon Farm one that was turned down earlier this spring. And the intersection was identified as failing shortly after it would open without even adding the development's traffic. So it just wasn't a large enough capacity project. So DOT looked at some different options, one of which was trying to get it funded through the STIP as a larger project. As Commissioner Helms knows, there's no money to be had, so that's not an option. So going through the pot of money that CARTPO has available to apply each year to projects was the next best option. So, as a reminder, what was proposed initially was a roundabout. It was a 2-lane roundabout. Wesley Chapel Elementary is right here. So, go past this one. So what's being proposed now is what's called a bow tie. The nearest example of where this design is being used is currently under construction at the intersection of Catawba Avenue and US 21 near the I-77 interchange in Cornelius. So that's an example of where one's under construction in the area. What this does is it eliminates left turns. You won't be making any left turns with this design. You go straight through. If you want to make a left, you make a right, and you turn around and go the other way. And then if you need to make a left from here, you take a right, turn around and go the other way. The benefit of this is obviously it simplifies the signal operations. You just have greens for the straight movements. There's no accommodating left turns. This roundabout is needed because of 2 reasons. One is that this roundabout's currently funded and is hopefully going to get built in 2025. It needs all the capacity it can get. It's a high growth area. It gets a lot of traffic. Also, you're talking about potentially hundreds of cars a day making this maneuver. You're going to remove all that travel of going up and back down if you put one in the middle. So this half roundabout essentially was put in the middle for those 2 reasons. The one down here at Chamwood, the DOT looked at putting it in front of the school, but it honestly worked better at Chamwood, and also they recognized the Chamwood intersection's not great either. So you really are getting 2 intersection improvement projects out of this. So the roundabout would go down here to the south to improve Chamwood, as well as to allow the left turns. So that's the design. I actually have and there's a zoom in on it. This is hyperlinked. If you want to see about a 3-minute animation of how it would work, the Virginia Department of Transportation put together a video on it, and if we don't need it, then we'll move right along. But that would be the design of the intersection. The initial estimate several years ago was about $3.2 million. If you were to inflate that in today's dollars, it'd be about $4.6 million. And CARTPO, in recognition of how the world is working these days, has required even more inflation adjustment and contingencies to be added to these projects. So it's now a $7.4 million project where the gap is what's being requested. NCDOT has found a $400,000 state grant that they can use to help with the match, because what's needed is approximately $1.26 million. So the proposal is to split it essentially 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. The division's coming up with a third, Wesley Chapel's coming up with a third, Union County's coming up with a third. When the cash would go out the door is probably in a couple fiscal years, because this won't get approved until 2025, mid-2025 is when the adjusted documents will be signed. But because there's already money available, the state will start work on this now, and this money could be applied to, say, the construction aspect of which is further down the road in terms of the schedule. And this money exists in the critical intersection program. You've committed approximately $1.1 million of money through, I think, FY29 that is unallocated. So the money exists, it's just a decision to assign it to this project or other projects. And they committed, and Wesley Chapel committed their money. They had a pretty contentious discussion at their meeting last week. Ultimately, by a 2-1 vote, they approved their commitment, and their mayor reached out to me and said, make sure to let me know what your board decides, because obviously their commitment then goes away if, and in fact the project goes away if Union County doesn't commit their share. So that's the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. The application process through CARTPO is at the end of the month, so this is unfortunately your only meeting to make a decision on this application.
Any questions for Mr. Hanson?
I have a question.
Mr. Merrill?
Could you go back to that aerial view, please? Yeah, that one. So is that third roundabout going to happen or not?
The one to the north? The one that just got turned into a signal?
Oh, so help me out. Is that near Potter Road? Or
Yes, that's Potter and Potter.
Okay, so that is now a signal.
Only for 12 months at
okay.
most. It was in recognition that something needed to be done. So the DOT put up a signal
Okay.
for the 1-year period. The intention is for it to be constructed next year.
A roundabout to be constructed?
Yes, ma'am.
So there would be 3 roundabouts
Yes, there would.
if this moves forward? Okay. Okay.
And what kind of distance is there between these roundabouts?
That's about 600 feet, which is your sweet spot for the U-turn. So, assume a little more than a quarter mile to the north.
I have personally seen a lot of accidents at that Potter Road location, and I have seen a lot on that Weddington Road, NC 84 area. I've just never seen, 3 roundabouts like this before.
I would encourage you to visit the village of Marvin then.
Okay.
Newtown has 3 right in a row.
Okay, so that is similar to this layout?
Yes, ma'am.
And it prevents the left-hand turns?
Yeah, no left turns.
And it's working well?
It's working, they work. I mean, crashes still happen, but it's hard to kill yourself in a roundabout. They're property damage only.
I don't want you to misunderstand. This exact design is not on Marvin Road. There is not a signal there. There's not.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, there's
I want to
none
make
in
sure
the
you
middle,
understand.
no.
He's just saying that there's several roundabouts in a row. The design where you have the signal in the middle, that does not exist on that roadway. It's not that this doesn't exist in the state, it's just that's not an example of where you have a signalized intersection, and at the intersection, you can only go straight or right. That's all you can do.
Yeah, that's correct. I misunderstood. Although I will say the intersection of Rocky River and 74 is similar in that you can cross it, but you have to do a U-turn somewhere to make the left turns.
Okay,
Could
thank
you go back to the slide that shows the total cost, including state dollars, local match? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Vice Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Bjorn, if you can go back to the aerial one more time. Thank you. So I actually travel through this intersection just about daily on my commute to work every single day. And what I can tell you is that we have to do something here, because right there on the side street, there, this adjacent to Wesley Chapel Elementary, Shamwood, what happens is traffic accumulates right there. And I really feel sorry for the parents that are trying to drop their children off there at Wesley Chapel Elementary, because they are ultimately dependent upon someone letting them into traffic there during the morning hours. And that's also the same time where you have, your rush hour traffic trying to leave Union County or go to different parts, maybe on the western end. So I typically take this route as opposed to going through Waxhaw traffic. And I come up this way, and traffic typically backs up all the way there from 84 down past Shamwood. And then to further complicate the issue, further north, going towards Potter Road, traffic backs up there too. Now, the signal that we've got in place temporarily, before we get that traffic circle, I don't know if it's helping or hurting us. Maybe a little bit. Maybe it's helping us a little bit, but traffic backs up there too. So we have to look at something to keep the traffic moving. And I don't know that this is a perfect solution, but I do know that we have to attempt something there to free this traffic up, because it is an absolute nightmare. I personally support, moving forward with this. The Village of Wesley Chapel has committed those funds. I think that, if we're looking for partnership, we've got that here with this project. And this is, it's been at the top of our list for quite some time. So it's been either at the top or near the top, regarding our critical intersections. Thanks, Bjorn, for bringing this up. I don't know how my colleagues feel about this, but I think this is appropriate to take action tonight.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to support this. A roundabout, an expensive roundabout that basically is built to serve a single limited purpose, essentially U-turns, is doesn't seem like a effective or wise expenditure of local funds or state dollars. So I'll be voting against it.
Mr. Chair, Bjorn, so this is what North Carolina DOT came up with.
Yes, ma'am.
Were other options other than all of these roundabouts? Was anything else considered, or is this the only solution?
They considered a large number, and more than 10.
Okay.
But I wasn't party to those conversations.
Sure.
I just know they wrestled with a lot of options before settling on this.
So I apologize. I had to, I'm still processing this diagram. I'm so sorry. Okay, so I would like a little more clarification on this primary intersection. Is that just one lane, or is it two lanes?
It's one lane in each direction. And then obviously the right turns.
So one concern I have is, it's not slowing anyone down in that primary intersection. Like all of the accidents that I'm familiar with on 84.
So it is signalized.
Okay, so it is,
Yes,
okay,
it is signalized.
It is signalized, so you have to stop and either make a right or go straight based on whether you get the green. And so that intersection has a light. You just cannot make a left at that intersection.
Yeah. I guess I am a little bit surprised that it's still one lane. Oh.
Right. Well, the issue is that to have a receiving lane on the far side of the intersection, if you're going 45 miles an hour, that needs to be a really long merge lane, and it would add a lot to the cost of the project. because I asked the same question.
I do, Mr. Chairman. So I certainly understand the concern from board members about this. Keep in mind that the board, as Bjorn indicated, did dedicate funds for intersection improvements that we use, and we use it for this purpose, to help fund like a matching grant, so to speak, for projects. This intersection has been identified as one of the most needed intersections in the county for improvements. It's dangerous. There are a number of issues there. And so while it is a significant amount of an investment, we do have those funds allocated for a future match, and we can accommodate it. So you could treat it as in, well, this is one of our highest needs. We're willing to consider this for funding, as well as the developer's funding that we also have received for this as well. So it's almost like a double match. We've got almost $400,000 from the developer, and we put another $413,000 of our own dollars in that as well. It's expensive, I get it. But essentially, if Wesley Chapel and Union County do not fund this, these additional dollars, then no improvement will be made to that intersection. DOT is just going to scrap the project and they'll move on to something else.
Mr. Manager, can you tell us, I don't know if you have this information, how much do we have in the critical intersection program budget? And how much would this be taking from that budget?
So you budget $100,000 annually for this? And as Bjorn was saying, through 2029, essentially, we would be using those future dollars, because that's what you do. You budget an annual amount. You've agreed to going up to 2029 of funding that, and so that's how we would accommodate this out of those future dollars.
We actually, up until this past fiscal year, was 100,000. Now it's 300,000.
And if we don't go forward, we may lose the Wesley Chapel funding as well as the project altogether, correct?
The project would stop. And unfortunately, also, that developer money would sit there because the condition was that money was for a project at 84 and Potter, and this right now is that project.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Merrill?
So correct me if I'm wrong, when the developer agreed to put this money into a roundabout, when did it go from one roundabout to 3 roundabouts? Because I think and please correct me if I'm wrong, when the developer allocated that dollar amount, it was for one roundabout, right?
It wasn't for any roundabout, it was just for a project.
Okay.
But to your point, it was anticipated that a dual lane roundabout would be what would be built there.
Okay.
DOT identified when they actually got into more of the design phase that was going to fail, that it actually would not serve the purpose it was designed for, and they went back and said, we've got to look at how we do this differently.
Okay.
And that's really that's what necessitated this, because they said a double roundabout won't work there.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Bob?
Bjorn, I'm hardly ever on this side of the county. At this intersection, and this is probably going to be a naive question, but at this intersection where we have a lot of accidents, high-speed accidents.
I don't know if they're high-speed or not, but there's a lot of accidents there and there's a lot of congestion. This intersection to the north, which is not a part of it, probably the most terrifying intersection I've driven through at night.
Okay.
Because with all the headlights and with all the turning movements, that was a lot. So I'm glad that one's getting a roundabout. But no, this was identified in our first critical intersection analysis back in 2016.
Right.
There's a lot of crashes, there's a lot of volume. NC 84, it's carrying a lot of traffic. Potter is as well. And you have a school right there, so it's very peaky in the AM with a lot of people dropping off their kids.
Right. And I hear your point. I mean, you hardly ever have fatal accidents at a roundabout, you know. So I could see where this could potentially save a life, you know. So I'll be supporting.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Vice Chair.
if there's no other questions, I'd like to make the motion that we approve the action requested, which is matching the Wesley Chapel contribution with $413,000 from the Critical Intersection Program to fund this project, the project at North Carolina 84 and Potter Road.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion indicate by aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
The next matter of business is item 24709, the Union County zoning and development standards pertaining to lowering rural density. I will recognize Lee Jensen, Planning Director, concerning this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back at the August 12th meeting, you asked staff to bring back a few options for ideas to pertaining to standards to lower density in the rural areas of the county. So we kind of got together as staff and sat around and brainstormed a little bit, and we're bringing you three ideas tonight that we think you should consider if you want to move forward and think about lowering density out in the more rural parts of the county. The first two are really kind of straightforward, really ways that are directly related to density. The third is a little unique, but I'll kind of go over all three of those in just a minute. But the first is basically a mass rezoning. So you would rezone all the residential properties out in the rural areas to a lower density zoning district. The second one is implementing a recommendation in the Union County UC 2050 comprehensive plan, essentially requiring a minimum of 30% open space in all developments of at least 10 lots. And the third is really getting at a density issue, but also some of these safety issues that we see on roads. So this would really look at requiring a larger minimum road frontage and larger lot sizes for lots that take access on an arterial street. It kind of apply that to all subdivision types. And I'm going to get into a little bit more detail here in a minute. I can stop after each one if you've got questions, or I can keep moving through. You just stop me if you want me to be quiet for a second. A mass rezoning, it is what it is. You're taking the entire, and I'm going to flip ahead one page here. So what we're talking about when we talk about rural areas, in the comp plan, we have rural residential and single-family residential. So essentially, all this green area is what's considered sort of those rural areas of the county. So you kind of got this area between Fairview and Stallings, and then east of Fairview and Unionville, and then wrapping around, you want to move clockwise to sort of south of Waxhaw and Mineral Springs. So you're talking about a fairly large area of the county. So just to give you some context to what we're talking about. So it would apply to all those residential properties, residentially zoned properties in those areas identified as rural residential on the land use plan map. Most of those properties now are currently zoned sort of a mix of RA40, RA20, R20, and R8. R8s are generally old mobile home parks. That was an old floating mobile home park district. The option could be to rezone to RA200, which that already exists in the UDO. That's not a new district. Or to create a new district. We could create an RA120 or R80 or something like that. Just to give you an idea what that is, 40,000 square feet is almost an acre, not quite. I think it's about 0.92 or something like that. 80 would be about a 1.8 acre property. 120 would be about 2 3/4, and then RA 200 is about 4.5. Those are all just rough, but that's kind of what we're talking about when we're throwing those numbers around. Some things to consider, there's some areas out there, like, for example, JARS. It's kind of a unique area. They have some apartments, they have some commercial aspects in JARS, so you may want to consider leaving some areas like that out. JARS is kind of down here, so it is in that rural residential area, but it's kind of area you may want to think about not including if you decided to go with this option. And existing RA 200 zones, but because those were conditional rezoning districts that have some specific conditions tied to them. We didn't have any straight RA 200 districts sitting out there. You wouldn't necessarily, you could if you wanted to, but this proposal is not considering rezoning these single-family residential areas that are in yellow. But the board could obviously give another direction on that if you wanted to. And just something else to consider, it may have some impacts to the tax base. Don't have enough information to say right now for sure that it would. I have talked to Van just about his thoughts on it, but really very data-driven. Their information is based on sales. Obviously, this hasn't happened yet. We did reach out to Stanley County. They recently did this, but their sales history isn't quite as deep as they need it to be to really give some guidance on that. The other thing to kind of, I don't have it as an item on here, but sort of think about is if you did go with the mass rezoning, there are lots of properties out there that are zoned RA 40 right now. Most of those in that green area are RA 40. And there are a lot of 1 acre lots. So you could potentially be creating a lot of nonconformity situations. I don't think that would be a huge issue because it's not like we're going to tell somebody you can't build on that property. If it was created legally and it becomes nonconforming, generally you're still allowed to build on those properties if it's vacant or rebuild if something happens to your house. But just to give a kind of a breakdown, if you went with properties, lots under 40,000 square feet in the entire rural residential area, there's about 12% of those that are under 40,000 square feet today. Under 80,000 square feet, there's about 40%. So, but everything else is over. But if you look at land area, the vast majority of the land area is under, is over an acre of property. So, but just some things to consider on that. I'll stop at the mass rezoning if anybody has any specific questions about that, or if you don't, I can keep going.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chair.
So Lee, in regards to the non-conforming use, if we went with something like this, I know that you give us some percentages there, but any idea, like a rough number as to how many properties in Union County may be affected or may be classified as non-conforming?
It would depend on how, what that number was set at. If it was a R80 or if it was something higher. There's about 2,600 lots right now that are less than 40,000 square feet. And then lots that are, between 40,000 and 80,000, there's about 6,100 lots. So if you, put those two together, you're around 8,700 or so lots.
Okay, thank you.
Nope.
And explain how that may impact the tax base?
Because you're lowering density, a lot of times your values, at least not the total value, but some of the value is based on the highest and best use and how you may be able to use that property. So if you're able to develop at 1 unit per acre and you cut it, say, in half, your yield is not as much as it would be. So it may impact the value somebody's willing to pay for that property.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lee, what about What about situations where, if we did a mass rezoning, how would that affect, cases where you might have a family member that wanted to deed over a smaller parcel of land to another family member?
Sure. Well, if you just did a complete mass rezoning, it would apply everybody equally, but you could come up with some language that maybe you could deal with family subdivisions. I know it's not a super popular thing to do, but there are places that do that. I will say it can be tough to regulate because you don't. Generally, there's some language when places do that says it has to be deeded to a son or daughter or a grandparent or a parent. It has to be somewhere in that family, and a lot of times there's a time period. They have to own it for a certain number of years, but we're not in the business of going out and pulling deeds every day to look to see when properties were sold. So that makes it a little bit difficult to regulate, but the board could come up with some options. You could ask us to come back and we could figure out ways to help people in those situations.
Well, I guess what I'm hearing you say is that, should the board have any kind of desire to move forward with any sort of mass rezoning, whether it be R80, R120, or whatever, that in order to accommodate something like that, we would have to essentially, produce some sort of conditions, to accomplish, some leniency there with family properties.
Yes.
Thank you.
And just to I meant to touch on the process a little bit. Any of these items, if you direct us to move forward with any of these three, they would all have to go to Land Use Board for a recommendation. The mass rezoning specifically, you don't do direct notifications, and you can, but you don't have to do direct notifications in a mass rezoning. You actually do an expanded publication in the newspaper. So we would run, I think it's 4 consecutive weeks. It's either a full page ad or a half page ad in the EJ. So it's just about a month just to advertise the public hearing. So it's a little bit longer publication notice. We could notify everybody. That's a pretty heavy lift, but a lot of people.
Any further questions for Mr. Jensen at this point, until he does his next section? I'm not going to cut you off, Mr. Jensen, I promise. Commissioner Baldwin.
Yes, Lee, there was a reference, maybe in your first slide, to 10 acres, and I didn't catch that.
So I think that's the next one, where we're talking about requiring 30%, minimum of 30% open space in all developments of at least 10 lots.
So if I own 4 acres and I have the road frontage and my land is suitable to perk, I'm still R40, correct? Or do I lose 30% of that?
So I hadn't gotten to that. So that's the next one I want to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just on the mass rezoning one right
Gotcha,
now.
okay, I'm sorry.
Very good.
I think we're ready to move forward, Mr.
Okay,
Jensen.
sounds good. So the second option comes directly from the Union County 2050 comprehensive plan. It was related to an open space recommendation. The recommendation was that you apply the standard to all subdivisions that create 10 or more lots. And you require those developments to set aside 30% of their site as open space. It would effectively reduce the development potential of a property by 30%, and it wouldn't apply to minor subdivisions. Actually, you could do some major subdivisions, because our major subdivision standard is 8 lots, so that you could actually do a kind of a 9-lot major subdivision and it wouldn't apply to it. So that may get at helping folks out that want to give a lot to a kid or something like that. It's kind of hard to explain in words, so I've got a couple of little charts here. So this example is a traditional development where there's no open space. Again, that example of 100 lots, or you have a 100-acre tract, RA40, you get about 100 homes. That's some quick and dirty math. That's not exactly right, but that's pretty close. So you can see you maximize your site, 100 houses, no open space. So you can see this example, you've just got a bunch of houses. If you have a 30% set aside, obviously the math there is easy. Got 100 acres, set aside 30% open space, you get about 70 homes. So, and again, you can kind of see some areas where open space is kind of set aside on this nice graphic that Communications helped us out with. But you effectively get at reducing density this way without really rezoning property. It's just a subdivision standard. You just say, if you're developing a subdivision, you have to set aside a minimum of 30% open space. That was a recommendation in the comp plan. Those numbers could slide up or down, probably slightly a little bit. But this is a second option. Anybody have any questions about this one?
So,
That open space doesn't include floodplain.
It does not. Well, that would be our thought, because you're already carving that out in the ordinance. You're saying that you can't count floodplains, road right-of-ways, and stream buffers in your net density calculation. So our recommendation was this would be above and on top of that. Obviously, you could tell us we don't want to do that. This could include it. So we would take whatever direction the board wanted to at that point.
Mr. County Manager.
Yes, sir. So I saw that what came out of that was a 10-lot standard, but as you mentioned, our current ordinance has a major subdivision standard of 8 lots.
Right.
The board could consider just saying it's
could.
8 lots, that's what our major subdivision standard is.
Right.
That way you're consistent.
Right.
So that was just what came out of the committee.
That was what
Okay.
came out of the committee. You could move that lot number down, you can move it up if you wanted to. You could probably move the 30% slightly.
That's right. And I do want to point something out. So, Lee is doing, easy math for you here. The reality is that even on a 100-acre tract, if you had 30% open space, you're not going to get 80 homes. And the reason for that is you have to reduce the right-of-way from the roads and some of the other things, and that's usually roughly about 10% or so. So there's other things that reduce the actual density that you have to take into consideration. They just did easy math for you, but you won't even yield 70 homes.
That's
out of
right.
that.
That's right.
Mr. Vice Chair.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So also, if we can go back to net density calculations kind of real quickly, as I understand it, we've taken action too to exclude things like pools, clubhouses, things of that nature too, that that may affect the final numbers. And this all comes off the top, correctly?
Correct.
So before we do anything, we're reducing by 30% on the open space requirement. And then these other things come into play. So, wetland streams, buffers, pools, clubhouses, all that.
Yes.
Okay. And you said that should the board want to, that we could take action and make this applicable to 8-lot subdivisions?
That's what our major subdivision standard is.
You would just essentially align it with what a major subdivision was, and not, not have some other rule about 10-acre or 10-lot subdivisions.
Yeah, I like that idea, to make that applicable to the 8-lot. Now, as far as, how does this, so this has no bearing on like out parcels, correct?
I'm sorry?
So this would have like no bearing on out parcels, maybe where, you've got a large parcel of land, but an acre sold, here on the road frontage, an acre, 2 acres, 3 acres, something like that, correct? So this would have no bearing, if we implemented something with 8 lots, there's nothing that we're talking about with 30% open space requirement that would be applicable there.
I would say generally not. One, I don't want to tell you a story though. There is, the way our ordinance works is it's 8 lots, and this is going to be a really complicated conversation, but it's 8 lots out of the parent parcel. The way that parent parcel is defined is the parcel that existed on February 14th, 1978. So, right. So you could, and we do run into this from time to time. It's not often, But every once in a while, we'll run into a situation where somebody's got, they've given lots to their kids, and then the kids gave lots to their kids, and you run into a situation where you may have, 8 minor subdivisions that have been created. Now you need to do that 9th one, and it kicks it into a major subdivision category. That, right now, it's not really difficult to deal with. There's a couple extra hoops that you have to jump through, but administratively, it's fairly simple to do. That could trigger something here. We have talked about redefining that parent parcel, because I think what we're seeing is general, when the ordinance was adopted in 78, you had this lockdown map, and now you've got a couple of generations of folks who have done minor subdivisions, and now you're running into major subdivisions that really should be minor subdivisions. But again, I don't want to sound like Chicken Little. The sky's not falling. We don't run into that often, that issue that often, but it does pop up from time to time. So I don't want you to think that it doesn't, and have the constituent call you when I say you got to carve out 30% open space on your 1 acre lot.
But to your question, though, typically, if you had, and I think Commissioner Balkum was asking this, if you had 4 acres, you had 4 acres along the road frontage, and you wanted to split those into 4 1-acre lots, that would not be a major subdivision.
Right.
That would not require 30% open space.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and Lee, I think that you've already touched on this, but just to be clear, what we're discussing here with this 30% open space requirement is already a recommendation in our 2050 plan.
Yes, sir, it is.
So if we provide a direction here to take action, then we would effectively just be making a recommendation, a requirement.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I move on to the last one? Okay. So the last one's kind of unique. Again, I think the easier way to talk about this is to look at the graphic here. So higher speed roads would equal larger lots and increased road frontage. So that effectively does 2 things. You get it a little bit of decreasing density, but you also get it a safety issue. We just had the conversation about the roundabouts and traffic and having to wait in traffic and conflict points and wrecks. I mean, this separates out driveways. It reduces conflict points. So higher speed limit roads, you would require more road frontage for the lots that front on that road, and you could also require a larger lot size. As the speed on those roads decreases, like if you move from 55 down to 45, that road frontage requirement could be reduced. I will say on this one, this is not one that I would do alone as just by itself. This is one that I would do in combination with something else. So just so clear on that.
Question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, but now this may be a solution to something like what I was just talking about with out parcels.
Yes.
Where you're requiring additional road frontage there. So in effect, you're kind of getting the same effect of the 30, or similar effect, potentially,
Right.
depending on speed limit.
Mhm.
There's variables.
Right.
But that may be a good way to mitigate some of those, smaller, minor subdivisions where you might have an acre here, an acre there, sold as part of a larger tract.
Right, yes.
Okay.
And I don't want you to think that minor subdivisions, that's a term that says minor subdivision, but they're not minor. They make up, a good bit of the work that we do. I would say the number of minor subdivisions we process through our office make up probably if you put them all together as one, it makes up a pretty large subdivision at the end of the year. I don't know, Bjorn, what we looked at that, it was about 100 minor subdivision lots a year? 100 to 200, yeah. So it's not small.
And Lee, do we have any kind of, requirement currently that's tied to speed limits in regards to road frontage like this?
It's not great, I'll put it that way. There are some standards, but we would want to draft some better language for our ordinance. That's really what this is about. This is about getting it at some density, but also some public safety issues.
Okay, thank you.
that's the three options. If anybody has any more questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But again, this third one, again, I wouldn't take, my recommendation would not be to take this alone. If you're interested in this one, it would be something to combine with another idea.
Right. So obviously, the board has a lot of information here. I always ask the staff to think about it and give a staff recommendation. I've talked to Lee about this, and the staff recommendation would be for the board to consider 2 and 3, essentially the open space requirement and the high-speed, the larger lots and increased road frontage in concert. Not that you can't do the rezoning. That just has a lot more consequences. It creates some challenges, and I think you can get at what you're trying to accomplish, and that is ultimately reducing the density within these rural areas. So again, from a staff perspective, we would recommend those 2, but you're welcome to certainly give us direction for anything.
And I'll also say, we like to be able to point back to something that's been adopted in a plan when we make these recommendations. So the comp plan has a 30% recommendation. The road frontage, we can point to a public safety issue there. The rezoning wasn't necessarily in a plan, but I will say, as you all are aware, there is a rural land use plan that's going to be kicked off, I believe, tomorrow. So we're going to start that process. There is going to be a whole slew of recommendations that's going to come out of that as well. So there very well could be a rezoning recommendation in there. I don't know, but.
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair?
So this is a question for staff. Do we need an official vote as far as the direction about how we want to go with this? Is that what we're looking for?
So yes, I'd like the board to kind of direct us on which options, if any, they would want us to work on. If they're just text amendments, we can run through those relatively quickly. If it's a mass rezoning, that will take a little bit of extra time.
Okay, thank you. Just a comment. First of all, Lee and Bjorn, to all of our planning staff, thank you for putting all this together. When we went into this, and the first time we discussed this, I'll be the first one to say that to me, looking at something like a mass rezoning may at that point in time, looked like the easiest way to accomplish what we were wanting to accomplish here. However, I think that as we've looked at these different scenarios tonight, I'm in agreement with staff that I think that we can accomplish what we're looking to do with a combination of the second and third items here, with the understanding that this would be applicable, to the 8-lot subdivisions. And so, I think that what this board as a whole was trying to look for when we first brought this item up and directed staff to bring us back some options is we have to start looking at what we can do to manage residential growth in our county, better manage that. This board has said time and time again that we're looking at 90% residential and we've got 10% everything else. So this is certainly, a way, I think, to, better manage that residential growth. I think this would be a big step for our board to formally direct staff to bring us back, a combination of items 2 and 3, for a look at maybe final approval, for that. And so, I certainly welcome the comments from my fellow commissioners, but for me, I'm in favor of a combination of items 2 and 3.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Merrill?
again, I would like to thank you and staff as well. This was a lot of information that I know you had to drill down to make your presentation tonight, so thank you for that. I do agree with Commissioner Helms on giving you direction to consider combining option 2 and 3. Option 2, as you already said, aligns with the 2050 plan. And I do agree with remaining consistent on the 8 lots because that's already, in place. And for public safety, I definitely would like to get more information on option 3 or implementing option 3 in some way from a public safety standpoint, and high traffic or high speed zones. So I would be in agreement with that as well. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one other brief remark. I think that as we look at this, option 1 with the mass rezoning, I don't think that it's the intent of anybody on this board to, negatively impact anybody in this county, any kind of individuals here in this county that want to be in this county and raise generations in this county. So as we look at these strategies, that is not our intention whatsoever. And I think that, if we looked at that first option, that there's certainly a possibility that we could be negatively impacting the people that we don't want to do that to. So again, this is coming from a place where that is not our intention at all. It is looking at an overarching, method to manage, some of the large residential growth that we've seen in this county. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you. Okay. Well, I'd be willing to put the motion out there that that we direct staff to bring us back, formal text amendment, additional information on, what the combination of items number 2, which would be require that 30% open space and developments, as well as the increased road frontage requirement, would look like as applicable to the 8-lot, subdivisions. And I would like to add one other item to that. And it's not one that we really discussed, but in regards to 90% residential versus 10% everything else. I would also like to add to that motion that we also formally direct staff to come back with potentially some ways that we might can incentivize commercial or industrial growth in the county. So as a second part to this, in the same way that we're looking at what we can do to better manage our residential growth, I would like to formally direct staff to bring us back scenarios or potential solutions so that we can incentivize those other areas that we desperately need.
Ma'am, do you have a time frame that you'd like for us to try to meet on that?
I would say that, within, what would be realistic for staff as far as the the items that we discussed tonight? Now, I think that we can probably, wait a little bit longer on the business items, but what would be realistic for staff? What kind of deadline do you think that you can meet as far as bringing this back to us for final approval?
So on the first part, with just the text amendment aspect of it, we can, I believe that we can get these written up and get them to our land use board at their November meeting. Honestly, the 30% open space applying to major subdivisions, that's not a hard text amendment to write. And then you take it to the land use board to get a recommendation and then bring it back for a public hearing. The lots and road frontage, I think we can also meet that same time frame. It's going to be a little bit more research, but that language exists in other places. We're not inventing anything new here. So I think we could probably hit a pretty tight deadline on that. If we could break it out and bring those back relatively quickly, but then incentivizing commercial and industrial growth, that's going to be some folks that is not just planning. We're probably going to talk to EDC and bring in some other folks on that one. That one may be a little bit longer time frame.
and Lee, you know, again, step in if I'm wrong. So I think maybe what we could do is work towards bringing this to the board for a public hearing at your first meeting in December.
Yes.
With the understanding that the, looking at industrial and commercial incentives or how we approach that, likely sometime after the first of the year.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we could potentially hold a public hearing December 2nd?
I think so. I think we can hit that.
Okay. And then pending the results of that, I'm assuming the procedure would be that final vote would be the following meeting. Is that correct?
It could be, or you could take action that night if you wanted to.
Okay.
It's just kind of like you're going to do on your stormwater amendment.
Okay. Well, then, if staff thinks that they can meet that requirement, then I would say December 2nd then.
Okay.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion indicate by aye.
Aye.
Next on the agenda is item 24718, Comprehensive Transportation Plan Pedestrian Map Amendments. I'll recognize Bjorn Hansen, Senior Planner, for this item.
Good evening again, Commissioners and Manager Matthews. This is a follow-up from action you took earlier this year to open the comment period, or to request CARTPO to open a comment period on a series of amendments to the Comprehensive Transportation Plan for sidewalk recommendations. So you can like or not like a CTP, one will exist in your community. They're required across the state by virtue of the general statute. We use this document all the time to make recommendations for rezonings, where to request additional land for future road widenings, where to make recommendations for new roads, rail, pedestrian, bicycle, and transit, but not intersection scale improvements. That is why we have our critical intersection program. We use the pedestrian map in our UDO when we review new site plans for development to determine where we would require sidewalks or not require them, and also to provide input into DOT projects such as bridge replacements. Or we also use that as a consideration in designing our critical intersection projects. For example, the intersection of Bonds Grove Church and Waxhaw Marvin that you assigned $500,000 to includes a multi-purpose path along one leg of the roundabout. So the existing map that was inherited when we switched to the Comprehensive Transportation Plan as the map we referenced for sidewalk requirements included a lot of recommendations, but there were some segments that we identified that were missing. And so these were along Waxhaw Marvin, Crane, Bonds Grove Church, Billy Howie 218. We also noted some segments down southwest of Monroe that when this map was created approximately 10 years ago, our adopted land use map and utility maps recommended these areas develop in a more suburban manner. That's no longer the case. So we felt that south of 75 and west of Monroe, these sidewalk requirements were no longer appropriate. So they were put together in this map that was used for public engagement and shown, green being the additions and red being the deletions, and everything else in gray being the existing network. And the municipal layers were put on to indicate the fact that some of these were inside the municipalities. So we coordinated with all municipalities to ask for their input, say, hey, are there segments that we need to consider to help implement your plans? And Waxhaw and Marvin said that this impacts us, we want it to be added. Everyone else said, no, they're good. So we worked with Waxhaw and Marvin, identified these segments, and received resolutions from them to open up the comment period. We conducted the comment period in August to September and had mailings to all the affected property owners, as well as our normal outreach process on social media, coordinated with Waxhaw and Marvin to go through their outreach channels. And the Land Use Board reviewed the changes at its September 17th meeting and reviewed the public comments and reaffirmed their recommendation. So we've been working on this since June. In September, In October, we reviewed the results, and Waxhaw and Marvin have both passed resolutions. We're recommending the changes as proposed. Now we are here before you. What would happen if you agree with these changes and we take it forward? It would go to CARTPO for information. It would go to TCC in December, but they're probably canceling their meetings in December, so it would actually get shifted to January. In terms of public comments, we had 45 responses via an online survey. There was a fair amount of concern about the 6 Mile Creek Greenway, which is the county line between Mecklenburg and Union County, submitted by residents of Marvin Creek subdivision. There's actually a greenway recommendation along the county line. It's actually on the Mecklenburg County line. There is an HOA amenity greenway in their community, and there was a lot of concern that this recommendation would be using their common area as a part of the greenway. Marvin spent a lot of staff time trying to explain this, and I think it's been taken care of, that no, that's not the case, and it wasn't even a part of our amendments. We weren't proposing to add or delete any of those. So that was a fair amount of comment that we received, and we received multiple emails as well. The comments that were against the recommendations were in the Bonds Grove, Waxhaw Marvin area, and they did focus on the fact that it is a rural area, a lot of equestrian uses, concerns about conflict between pedestrians and the equestrian uses along the corridor. The majority, in fact, over 90% of the residents who signed a petition against this were related to Marvin's Greenway bond that they had earlier this year that wasn't passed. And so they opposed the multi-purpose path. We said, well, this is a sidewalk. And they said, well, we don't like the sidewalk either. So that was resubmitted to us as a part of the comment period. But we explained that the county is not in the business of going out and building sidewalks. We require them as part of developments, or potentially they get included as a part of an intersection project. But Marvin or Waxhaw both have built facilities and may build some in the future. You are inside Marvin, and if they do that, that's up to them to do. It's not the county. So the Village of Marvin heard this feedback and still reaffirmed the recommended changes. So it's been heard, it was deliberated on, but they recommended the changes that were proposed. So in terms of the sections to be deleted, no concerns. There were some people who noted, said it would be nicer to have these sidewalks in these areas for people to be able to walk to school or just go for a walk along the road. So those were the comments that were received. Marvin and Waxhaw took action 2 weeks ago. You have tonight to deliberate this. If you wanted to delay it till November, you could, but that would mean that the November CARTPO action would then get delayed to probably January. And so the requested action is to confirm the amendments to submit to CARTPO for consideration. You have a resolution in your packet to memorialize that action. And I would note that you could consider a subset of the recommendations, but we would then have to go back to the municipalities and talk through these differences. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Bjorn, if you could go back to the Marvin consideration. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now, if I understand correctly, the concerns voiced by the Marvin residents, this is an area that's not even within our jurisdiction, correct? This is
some of it is.
Okay.
It goes back and forth along the corridor.
Okay. And based off your interpretation of the responses that we received, you believe that this is essentially associated with, the Greenway bond that ultimately failed there in Marvin, correct? That the negative connotation has something to do with that?
Well, I spoke with one of the people who organized the petition and, explained the difference between the two initiatives, and she said these petition submittals still stand as something that they want to have considered as a part of this. And I can pull up the comments if that would be helpful. Or not. We'll see what happens. It's supposed to come up as an interactive map.
To answer your question, Commissioner Helms, and I think really the issue is that most of the negative comments were more related to within their local community versus anything that the county does. Because as Bjorn pointed out, we are not in the business of building sidewalks. We don't do that. We require them as part of developments, but we don't go out and actively locate and build sidewalks. And I think that those communities or those individuals who had concerns are really more speaking out about their dissatisfaction with what's going on in their own communities.
So these are the comments that were received. You can see the Marvin Creek cluster right there along the county line, and then the remainder were really focused on the section of Waxhaw, Marvin, and Bonds Grove. And you can see how the municipal limits do go back and forth, depending on which side of the road you're on or which segment you're on. Then in here you can click on any of the comments and see the notes, such as sidewalks along these busy country roads would be unsafe, too many cars, speeding, narrow roads, constant accidents, unsafe environment. So this was how we collected input, although we also received emails and phone calls.
Thank you, Bjorn. So I want to be clear, I'm very sensitive to, the concerns of Marvin residents. I think that in a lot of ways, what we're discussing here makes a lot of sense because you obviously don't need sidewalks in certain areas, and our, current plan kind of puts sidewalks in areas where they're not going to be of any kind of benefit. And so I think that's a good note that, both you and our county manager made that we're not in the business of just making sidewalks to make sidewalks. And the last thing that we want to do is put a sidewalk that leads to nowhere. I think that, in certain areas they're going to be needed, in certain areas they're not. I guess my only hesitation here is I want to better understand, why it is that we had so much response out of, Marvin, and if that is the case, that they're voicing their displeasure, at things that are happening there with their communities, their neighborhoods, what have you, then I think that that's fair. But I think that, too, I think that we all need to realize that Union County, we have jurisdiction in unincorporated Union County, and, Marvin, of course, would make decisions there in Marvin. That's my only hesitation is I want to make sure that, our Marvin folks, that their concerns are being adequately addressed, but I don't know that we have that jurisdiction, being unincorporated Union County.
I think if you can look at the area in green, most of it is actually within the incorporated areas. It's sprinkled around, which we have some jurisdiction in, and then you have the one section, and I can't remember the name of that roadway, but that is solely within our jurisdiction. But a good bit of that is outside of our decision-making.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, if there's no other questions from my colleagues, then I'll make the motion that we approve the requested action for item 24-718, the Comprehensive Transportation Plan Pedestrian Map Amendments, requesting CRTPO to approve the proposed additions and deletions to the pedestrian map portion of the Comprehensive Transportation Plan.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be supporting the motion. I think, what this seems to address is making increasing the utility of the sidewalks. And to the extent that we're doing that by addressing gaps that fall wholly within, unincorporated Union County, I think it makes a lot of sense, is very reasonable, and is worthy of being supported. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion indicate by aye.
Aye.
The next item of business is item 24-588, OPEB options actuarial study results. I will recognize Beverly Lyles, Finance Director, for this item.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Tonight we have with us our actuarial consultant from Kavanaugh McDonald with us. His name is Mr. Todd Green. If you recall, back in June, you gave staff direction to work with an actuarial to determine and analyze the long-term financial impact of our other post-employment benefits outside of the local government retirement system. Those two benefits are health insurance for retirees and separation allowance for retirees. So we have him online with us tonight virtually, so we're hoping this all goes well. I'm going to turn the presentation over to him to go through the results, and I will be advancing the presentation for you all.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. Just to introduce myself, my name is Todd Green. I'm a principal and an owner of CavMac, and I've been working with, I work with almost 300 city and county governments in North Carolina. I've been doing this for 27 years. So started off as an analyst, and now I'm the boss. But so just to, if we can go to the first slide, please. So this is just to serve as an introduction, so just introduce myself. But the second thing is I am an actuary. I work with pension plans, defined benefit plans, and pension plans basically assist in the attraction and the retention of employees. So that's the value of them. Union County currently is a participant of the North Carolina Local Government Employees Retirement System. And in addition to that, you guys, this was just mentioned, but your county does provide two additional post-retirement benefit options or plans. One is for separation allowance for law enforcement officers and certain general employees, and the other is post-retirement health insurance for people who retire. And then this picture here just shows, because most people don't know what an actuary is, so I like to just at least try to define that. Basically, our role is we work with in defined benefit plans, and so ultimately the cash flows they cannot be predicted with certainty. So we follow the actuarial process, and ultimately what comes out is an estimate of the probability of people receiving benefits in the future, and so we make estimations on things. Essentially retirement, when people retire, and then how long they're going to live after retirement. And that's critical because those, the retirement stage is what defines when a payment begins, and then ultimately they're payable for life. So when somebody dies, the payment stops. So if we go to the next slide. So we were asked to cost some different benefit alternatives to the separation allowance and the post-retirement health care. And so at the first is, we go to the next slide, please. So the first is the special separation allowance. And this is established under the North Carolina General Assembly. And it is required that you have to pay this for law enforcement officers. And what it is a temporary benefit for law enforcement officers. And if they retire prior to age 62, they get a pension, a subsidy paid from Union County directly to them up until age 62. And for law enforcement officers, in order to qualify, they have to retire with 30 years of service, or they can retire at age 55 and with 5 years of service. And the reason why this benefit is designed this way, it's payable to age 62. If somebody retires prior to age 62, they cannot start their Social Security benefit. So essentially, this gets them to age 62 when they can start their Social Security benefit, essentially. This is optional to provide to general employees, so non-law enforcement officers, and Union County currently does provide that to general employees that were hired prior to July 1, 2013. And again, they have to, in order to qualify for it, they have to have 30 years of service on retirement or age 55 and 5. The other thing to point out here is the benefit. It's 0.85% times the member's base rate of compensation at retirement times their years of service. So if somebody works 30 years of service, they're going to basically get 25.5% of their pay payable to age 62. Next slide, please. So here is the proposal. So on the left, I've already gone over that. So this benefit is required to be paid to law enforcement officers, but right now, in order to qualify as a general employee, you have to have been hired prior to July 1, 2013. The proposal that we were asked to look at was to extend this benefit to all general employees. After covered would be covered under this proposal. So if we go to the next slide. So, and I'd also like to point out that the county has already set aside about over $5 million in a trust to fund these benefits. So you do have assets that are accumulating investment income to help pay for these benefits in the future. But the first thing I point out here is the actuarial determined contribution. So that is, actuaries, we come up with how much do you need to fund the plan every year. So based on the last time we did this measurement, your current actuarial determined contribution to fund your separation allowance is $2.9 million. Extending that and that's for fiscal year 25, extending the coverage to the employees, general employees are not covered, that would increase that cost from $2.9 to $3.9 million. The cover population, that would grow from 469 members all the way up to, and that includes active and retired members. And basically we're adding a lot more active. So we're increasing the total covered number of people up to 1,371. And then we have the total pension liability. So that's the plan's accrued liability. That would increase by $5 million. That's an important number because it shows up on your financial statements. And then finally, we have the additional pay-go costs. So the top line is the pay-as-you-go cost in thousands. So we expect in 2024, our projected pay-go cost is $250,000, and that's expected to increase up to $1.5 million 10 years out. And below you can see the increase in that pay-as-you-go cost ranges from $62,000 to just over $300,000 there, or $350,000 by 2031, and then it goes down slightly. And again, I'd like to point out that you do have $5 million, over $5 million sitting in a trust right now, which is, helping fund this cost. So if you were to approve this, your actuarial determined contributions would go up by $1 million a year. But you would also that money would be going into the trust to accumulate investment income and reduce the cost in the future. And I'll just stop here if there's any questions on the separation allowance, because after this, I'm going to go into the health insurance side.
So I just want to point something out so the board is aware of this. We fund a trust, but that money is just sitting in a bank account. We actually pay every year this cost. When he was talking about PAYGO, we actually cover this cost. It's budgeted in your annual budget every single year. And so that trust is really just a safety net, is really all it is. We're not using it to fund these costs. It could be used to fund that in the future, but I do want to point out that we are not relying on the trust to actually make these payments.
The amount also in the trust decreases the total pension liability that we have to record on our financial statements. So we actually book the net pension liability instead of the full. So the trust, the money that's in the trust reduces what we actually report each year on our financial statements that you see when the audit's presented.
And also on this chart, if you look at the very bottom where it says increase, that's just the increase we would pay each year from what we pay now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Because I believe those are the numbers I've seen earlier. That's just in thousands, like 2024 would be 62,000.
That's correct.
Are there any further questions about separation allowance, or will advance forward for the OPEB portion?
Okay, so separation allowance is pretty simple because it's based on a formula, that I described earlier, that 0.85% times service times their earnings at retirement. Health insurance is a little different because, you're basically providing health insurance to your retirees. The retirees do pay a small portion of it, but, and then when they turn 65 and they're eligible for Medicare, they are eligible for a Medicare supplement plan. So this is a lifetime benefit. So, so currently you're providing this to all full-time employees who retire from the North Carolina retirement system. So, and you can see the eligibility points here. People hired prior to 2008 only had to work 10 years of service. People hired between 2008 and 2013 had to work 20 years of service to qualify. Hired after 13 are not eligible at all. Next slide, please. So we were asked to look at two different, or actually three scenarios. And this would be extending healthcare, post-retirement healthcare to everybody hired after 2013, July 1, 2013. The first scenario is complete. So the first scenario is for those who aren't currently eligible, it would be 20 years of service. So they have to retire from your county with 20 years of service, and then they would be eligible for post-retirement health care. Scenario 2 is not as generous. It's all you have to complete 10 years of service, but you also have to be age 60. So that's not as generous as 20 years because 20 years has no age requirement. It's just 20 years of service. And then finally, the third scenario we looked at was the combination of the 20 years of service regardless of age, or the completion of 10 years of service with age 60. So we combine those two scenarios together in the third scenario. So next slide, please. So here is the impacts, or the financial impacts. So again, we're showing the total OPEB liability, which is the plan's accrued liability, and it's $99.6 million. And for scenario 1, so scenario 1 is the 20 year of service, regardless of age. That increases your liability by $18.1 million. Scenario 2 is the 60 and 10, and that's because that's not as a generous of a benefit. It doesn't cost as much. That doesn't increase your liability as much, so it only increases by 10.5 million. And then scenario 3 is a combination of the two, and that increases your liability by $24 million. And how that relates to your actuarial determined contributions, so we do provide your funding cost for the plan, and that's $4.4 million for fiscal years 24 and 25. If we added scenario 1, it would increase the cost it would increase your cost by $3.2 million. If we added scenario number 2, that would increase your cost by $1.9 million. And then scenario 3 increases by 4.2. And then below that, consist with the consistency of how we showed the separation allowance, we show your projected pay-go cost, and you can see that we're projecting out from your baseline with no changes is $4.7 million per year, and that grows just under $7 million. And then you can see the additional cost under the two scenarios, and these are in thousands, so it doesn't, by 2026, you're starting to see, substantial increases with, the 43,000, the 49,000. Eventually, that grows up to, almost an additional $1 million in pay-go costs for scenarios 2 and 3. Scenario 1 doesn't have as much of an impact. And again, and I'd also like to point out here that you have roughly $70 million also set aside in your OPEB trust, which is also paid, where these benefits are getting paid out of, I think, with a combination of contributions and benefit payments.
So we are not currently paying anything out of the trust yet. We are contributing to the trust to decrease our net overall liability. We meet the contribution 2 ways in the past. We pay for our retirees' health care costs today out of our health care self-insured fund. Then in the past, not in the current fiscal year, we took a OPEB holiday from making a cash contribution to the trust, but in the past, we've only been contributing to that trust and not actually deducting anything out for payments for retirees' health care. At some point in the future, that should be, something you as a board would need to consider if you wanted to consider that for future budgets and how we pay for retirees' health care costs.
Right. So much like I mentioned before, the trust is really a savings account. We are making the payments on an annual basis to cover the actual cost of the health insurance as well as the claims. Just to make sure everyone understands that chart below, what it is saying is that for scenario 1, it's estimated that for 2024, the additional cost is $3,000. For 2025, the additional cost is $5,000, and then up to 2023, the estimated additional cost is $36,000. So it's not $360,000 or $3.6 million. That's the actual number that they increase if you add all.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
If you add all employees.
But just to point out, it is less because people need to get to that 20-year mark, before, so the population has to get to that 20-year service mark before they retire, before they become eligible.
Yeah.
Todd, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Now, you said you worked with numerous governments, municipalities, and counties. How would you compare Union County's current standing to others you've worked for? And if we were to approve the separation allowance and, let's say, scenario 1 on the health insurance, how would that affect our standing with other governments? If you can give me a broad answer to that. I know that may not be a fair question.
So I would say that, kind of unusual because you've, because you're no longer allowing, you've cut it off for people hired prior to 2013, whereas most of the towns and counties, they haven't cut it off. They just, make people work longer to get it.
And Todd, from a funding standpoint, as far as what this county has committed to putting back into that trust, I think we're pretty well funded across the state compared to other counties and jurisdictions. We've been very supportive of that in the past. So, I mean, can you speak to that as far as where we rank amongst other counties?
Yeah, so absolutely. You are, your OPEB liability, your health insurance, your post-retirement health care liability is almost 50% funded, which is way beyond most towns and counties in North Carolina. And the reason for that is this towns and counties weren't required to show a liability for post-retirement health care in their financial statements until 1996. So it was kind of, catch up after that. And, but you guys have really made a tremendous commitment in terms of funding your OPEB liability, and you are one of the top ones, for a plan your size in the state for sure.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Beverly, or Todd, staff, so the numbers that we're looking at here going from 2024 to 2023, I mean, just in a nutshell, we're already contributing to this fund. The numbers that we're looking at for like 3,000, that in 2024, that's just money on top of what we're currently doing or putting into that fund that we would have to commit, correct?
Well, this is showing the pay-go cash for the actual retiree benefits for healthcare costs today. So this is what your current retirees are currently costing our health fund plan today, is the $4.7 million. So these are actual costs that we budget in the annual budget process in the healthcare fund to pay for the retirees' healthcare cost.
But I think his question is, like in scenario one, we would just have to add 3,000 and then 2025, 5,000, like the chart says, in addition to what we already pay. Is that correct?
That's correct. But I understand that is not an additional cash contribution into the trust. That's the additional annual budgetary impact to pay in the insurance cost for those medical claims then when the retirees are going for their doctor's visits or appointments.
Okay, thank you.
I want to clarify something, Mr. Chair. And that's 3,000 total, not 3,000 per retiree.
Is that correct, Todd? Is 3,000 total?
That's correct. That's
Yeah.
correct.
And as he said, the reason for that is these people that are currently not eligible would not become eligible for this benefit until they reach that 20-year mark. So until they reach 20 years of service, they're not going to show up in a liability because they're not even eligible for it until that time frame.
And is this a projection based on the number of county employees we have?
That's correct.
So, and we don't know how many of those will ever be eligible at this point, correct?
Right. You don't know until they reach that eligibility standpoint in their career. That's correct.
Right.
In Beverly, most of the folks that are receiving this benefit now were under that 10-year requirement, not a 20-year requirement, right?
I don't know the difference between the two. We would have to pull the data to see.
But it's safe to say that it was easier to qualify under the 10-year requirement than it will be under the 20-year.
Oh, yes, yes. And you have to think the average service years of an employee today, Julie is here, somewhere between 5 and 7 years is the average service of an employee today. So the people that are currently on the plan, they had 20 years of service, but they were hired a long time ago and they've retired now. So we're seeing a lot shorter years of service than we have in the past. So you won't see that full effect until the employees that are here today reach their 20-year service mark.
Well, that would be part of the benefit of having this, so hopefully those employees will stay and won't leave and will retire from the county hopefully one day. That's just a statement.
Well, I mean, just to expand on that, I think, number one, that's why the chairman has asked, had asked for us to evaluate this. The board was gracious enough to allow us to have an actuarial study done on this, and ultimately, what we've heard from the sheriff's office as well as from our other staff members is that this is a recruitment and retention tool, and that's and that is what obviously we would intend it for.
And at this point, I think 46% of our employees have less than 5 years of service. Is that correct?
I think that's accurate. So, at this point, and this is information the board has asked for, we're certainly interested if the board has any additional questions or if you have some direction you would like to give as far as either one or both of these items.
Any further questions for Ms. Lyles or for Todd? Okay, Todd, we certainly appreciate you doing this study for us and speaking with us tonight.
Sorry you had to wait so late to get
That's
there.
okay. You guys are in dangerous territory making the actuary go last. Usually we put people to sleep, so.
That may be a good thing.
So, well, thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank
Any further comments? I'll make a motion that we implement the post-retirement health care option as presented in scenario 1, which would be the 20-year retirement. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I would just like to make a comment. We have reached a time in our society where people are jumping ship every couple of years and we're having to train and retrain, and I know there's hiring challenges, let alone retaining them for 20 years. In an effort to, provide stability and continuity and honoring those that are loyal enough to serve Union County, I will be supporting the separation allowance and the healthcare presentation tonight.
Okay, now that motion was strictly on the health retirement benefits. I think we're going to take them one by one.
Oh, you're going to do it separately?
Yes, ma'am. But
okay.
Your comments are well taken. And I agree with what Commissioner Merrill says. I think we have to do something to attract good employees. We have to do something to retain good employees. I think we have excellent county employees. I mean, it seems like every meeting somebody's getting an award. And this is for people, this is for all the county employees. When you say 902 employees, we're talking about people that work at the landfill, people that work in the water department, people that work in IT, of course, the sheriff's department. I mean, across the whole county as far as the employees we have. I mean, they do so much stuff. I sure don't know all about it, but I appreciate what they do. And, if they're going to give us 20 years of their life, that's a big chunk to work for somebody that long, and I think we should reward them for that. Any further discussion on the scenario 1 of the insurance, the post-insurance health care option? Well, all in favor indicate by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we'll move to the separation allowance. This is something that some of the county employees have. The thing I like about this is it would give basically all the county employees the same benefits. We have county employees now that do the exact same job, but they don't have the same benefits. And, you know, by and large, I think they do a great job overall, and this is just something that would reward them. Of course, you know, they've got to go to at least age 55 to even be eligible for this, so most of those people are going to have a number of years anyway. So I'm going to make another motion that we implement the special separation allowance as it was presented to us at 30 years of service or at age 55 with 5 years of service. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was more than happy to vote on the first motion, and I'm glad it was unanimous, but I find that I can't support this motion. You know, basically a decade ago, a decision was made to phase this out. And I think for good reason. I mean, these kinds of defined benefits, certainly in the private sector, have been going away for a long time, you know. And if you look at the additional pay-go costs that the actuary presented to us, these are not insignificant annual pay-go costs. And you know, they're going up, and up. By 2030, 2031, basically a third of $1,000,000 a year. Yeah, I just think in this environment where we have a lot of needs, a lot of priorities, we have to be sensitive to you know, how we're spending the taxpayer's dollar. You know, I just think, you know, a special separation allowance, resurrecting it essentially, is not the right move. I understand that we do it for, you know, law enforcement, for sheriff's deputies. But, you know, that's a decision the state has made, and, you know, they've made an argument for, you know, arguably good public policy reasons that law enforcement should have this. But this is entirely within our universe to decide, you know, for regular county employees. And again, I just think it's not the right move to resurrect it. You know, I get that we have to look at the broader job market and look at it competitively and make sure that we have a combination of compensation and benefits that attracts good people. But again, at least in the private sector, these kinds of defined benefits have been going away for quite a while. And I think the decision a decade ago to basically phase this thing out was the right one. And I don't think we should be resurrecting it, so I will be voting no. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman Hill.
This may be maybe better addressed by Beverly, but do we know, I mean, obviously we're looking at this tonight, but have we benchmarked other, you know, municipalities, you know, any other, you know, local governments that may be offering this? Are we, I guess what I'm trying to ask is.
We're kind of unique in the aspect for separation allowance that we offer to general employees.
So this would be, as you put it, unique. So
Very unique.
We would stand out essentially as compared to, you know, other municipalities and local governments in the general area.
That's correct.
I want you to define unique, meaning other county governments do not do this.
Not for their general employees. They're required by state law to do it for law enforcement officers, but not for general employees.
Okay.
Now, if you ask me how many, I couldn't tell you, but we are unique. When I talk to other jurisdictions at conferences, nobody that I've talked to has done this. So.
And being unique is a good thing. It'll attract people that won't go other places. They'll come to Union County because we have benefits that other counties and cities don't have. That's part of it, to attract good employees and to keep good employees.
Beverly, I mean, I'm just assuming that it would be cost related as to why other municipalities, other governments don't try to fund this benefit.
That's
I mean,
correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
Any further questions? Commissioner Balkin?
Yeah, maybe a couple questions, Beverly. I notice when you go down the timeline from 24 to 33, when you get over to 32, the price starts dropping. Can you explain that to me, please?
I wish the actuarial was still on, because he can explain that to you. But more than likely, it has something to do with the number of employees that may come off at that point based on their age, if they're going on the supplemental plan for Medicare. So they have to look at each individual separately and their age and when they reach those milestones. So you're talking about when it goes down from 32 to 33?
I think he's talking about separation.
From 31 to 32, it drops 27,000, 270,000.
Separation allowance?
Yeah.
Okay.
27,000, I'm sorry.
Tell me again what year you're looking at. 23, 20, 31,
31 to
32.
32.
I don't know, other than you would have to look at the age of the employees and when they come on separation allowance and when they go off. Because when they reach 62, they go off. So if there's milestones where several employees are meeting that 62 years of age during that year, they no longer receive separation allowance after that point. And that could be just one employee coming off for $20,000 difference a year.
And Beverly, I mean, you say this is unique. Have other counties had these programs and backed away from them?
I'm not sure. I'm not certain about that.
We did reach out to some listservs and some of our colleagues. Some of the municipalities and counties still do offer it. Some never offered it. Some are looking at adding it back. So if the board wanted more detailed information, we could try to do a little bit more research and bring that all back to you. We're saying we're unique. We don't know what that actually means. So if we want to put some data behind that, we can do a little more research and come back to y'all. I think we could reach back out to Kavanaugh to see how many municipalities and counties do offer this, to see exactly where we would fall in that.
I would like more detailed information before I make a decision.
And you're talking about on the separation allowance, correct?
Yes, sir. We can try to gather how many counties, how many cities do currently offer it, how many did. We did informally do that as part of this process. We didn't get a huge response, but I think Kavanaugh is a good resource because they do a lot of this for those governments, so they should be able to provide that data.
And along with that, I just want to make sure that when we're getting that data, if there's any way for him to let us know for the counties who are not doing it in order to recruit and retain our counties considering going back to this just like we are, having the same conversation.
Yeah, we can try to get you as much of that information as we can. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chair?
I share some concerns with Commissioner Balcom. And, I also share some similar feelings as Commissioner Merrill does, and also you with this item. And I would say that, this is an item that I feel like many of us have been torn over at some point as we've reviewed this, because I think that there's a general willingness from this board to do everything that we can to, offer benefits and good things for our associates here at the county. I don't think that any of us would want to, ever take away benefits. And I think that there's a genuine understanding that we want to do what's right by our folks. But with this is a commitment. This is a large commitment in funds, over, from here to eternity, because, this is something that, once it's implemented back, I don't think should be removed lightly. And, with that, I would kind of like to see where we kind of compare. I'd like to see, if there is, any sort of, commonality there with other local governments, I don't think that having more information is a bad thing. If we have to make this decision tonight, I'm just a little bit concerned that we may be making this decision potentially a little bit in haste. So I would tend to agree that I would like to have more information regarding the comparison information, if we can find any at all, about how we would compare with other local
And
governments.
just to clarify, that's for separation allowance only.
Correct. Yes.
Mr. Deputy County Manager, if I withdraw my motion, can you get us further information that hopefully by our next meeting so we can make a decision on this? You think that'll give you enough time?
We will certainly try to get as much as we can by that time, yes, sir.
Okay, and we're talking about the separation allowance. We've already passed the health insurance matter.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Balkin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is my concern. Once you open this door, it's hard to close it. And I just want to be sure we're making a wise move, It's hard, it's just tough. You can't hardly take these benefits away once you open that door. And I just certainly not looking to make any enemies, but I do want to be sure this is sustainable, So that's my concern.
Understood. Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Merrill.
Commissioner Balcom, I absolutely hear what you're saying, but, clearly in past history, it has been there, stopped. Some people got it, some people didn't get it. There's a slide here that we looked at tonight. Beverly, I don't know if you can go to it. It says special separation allowance at the very top, and then it has law enforcement on the left and general on the right. And I think the column on the right is what is so muddy. Some people are getting it, some people are not. Then you have to keep up with, when did you get hired? Were you before this date or after this date? And so, one employee may be getting it, but the person next to them isn't. And so it has stopped and started. And so, it is at the pleasure of this board what we decide when we get more information. But when I first heard this information, it just felt like it was going to create more continuity and among the people who are in the offices and the different departments, whether some were getting it, some weren't getting it. But again, this is a temporary payment until the age of 62, and they're only getting the multiplication factor of how many years of service they have or have not put in. But it kind of, when I first heard this, it sounded like it was putting everyone on an even playing field, because there has been so much stop and start, when I look at this column here. So that, I just wanted to offer that input. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, I'll withdraw my motion at this point, and we'll wait and get some further information from staff. All right, the next item, I believe the Vice Chairman Helms had a issue on a resolution. I'll let you take over on that, Vice Chairman Helms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a resolution that I think everybody's got a copy of, but we spend a lot of time on this board talking about CRTPO projects. We haven't really discussed the Helms Road extension. So we a couple of months ago, we did take a position on the Waxhaw Parkway. And for the record, I'm not asking my colleagues to consider reconsidering that. This is a different project that is on the western portion of Waxhaw. And so adopting this resolution tonight would essentially, show support for this particular project at CRTPO. I would, Bjorn, are you available to come up and maybe provide some additional details on this?
Yes, sir. Let me bring up a couple maps just to put things into perspective. So here we are in Waxhaw, and actually this map is being used for the earlier action that you approved on consent for road naming. This is related to the bridge over the railroad tracks and over NC 75 on the west side of Waxhaw. It also includes connecting Helms Road with the new road into Millbridge. Well, Waxhaw Parkway exists to about here. Town of Waxhaw is applying for a grant to connect from here to here. And so that's the extent of the project. It's not very far. In fact, I can measure it. It is, it's a third of a mile when you include the curve. So it's not very far, but it's really important because it does connect 16 to this whole area over here on the west side of Waxhaw. And it's completely within their municipal limits. Here's a map of the properties and the municipal limits. The bluish color is Waxhaw, so here's the intersection with Helms and Waxhaw Marvin. This would be the connection going through a few properties. It would include some people's backyards, but that's a decision to be executed by Waxhaw in terms of how to accomplish that. And then here's 16 right here. So it is part of the Waxhaw Parkway, but they're calling it the Helms Road Extension. It's 6 of one, half dozen the other. I'm not sure what they're going to name this segment of road when it is actually built. So that will be a choice for the town when that happens.
Thank you, Bjorn. And I would just say that, the concerns that we had for the Waxhaw Parkway, that included, the propensity for, high residential development. And so with this current project, I don't think that's a possibility with the Helms Road extension. And I do believe that this would be beneficial to the area as a whole, and I think that it would provide at least some traffic mitigation. Now, I did call some of the other stakeholders that we actively work with at CRTPO, including the town of Mineral Springs. Mineral Springs is going to be considering a similar resolution in support of this. And obviously, Waxhaw supports this as well. But I believe that this is something that we have some general consensus on, a project that the municipalities agree upon, would provide some traffic mitigation, but also does not pose a negative to our concern regarding high-density development. And so I would hope that our board here can support this. I believe that this would be something good for the area.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Merrill.
Thank you, Commissioner Helms, for that insight to Carpo and you serving on that organization for us. One concern that I thought of when we make that connection, would there be any homes impacted, between point A and point B?
So here's the aerials. You can see where the parkway stops at the entrance to this neighborhood, and then it gets squeezed between the two neighborhoods. So you have a backyard here and here and here. Those are homes. This large property has a home on it. This one has a home on it. This one does not have a home on it. So yes, people's yards are going to be impacted. I don't have the specific design to know where exactly it would go in terms of impacting them, but it's all within the town of Waxhaw.
I can chime in a little bit on this. So I actually had some conversations with some of the Waxhaw folks today, and it's my understanding that, again, Bjorn said that 100% of these properties are within the town limits of Waxhaw, but it's also my understanding that they have approached some of the impacted parcels and the homeowners there, and that they've got some at least general buy-in from those folks regarding the impact that would have. So I understand the concern with that, and I have that same concern. You know, ultimately, that's within Waxhaw's jurisdiction, and again, I'm being assured that there has been communication there with those folks and that they are fully aware of the impact. Okay, so if there's no other questions, I'll make the motion that we adopt the resolution, adopt the resolution of support for the town of Waxhaw's application for the CRTPO grant program for the Helms Road Extension project.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion indicate by aye.
Aye.
All right, our next item is item 24-657, the motion for proposed amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance of Union County. You want to speak to that, Mr. County Manager?
Certainly. So as the staff presented, this came out of the 2050 comp plan. These are some text changes that would essentially require the same stormwater requirements for all developments. It would increase it from the 25-year storm to the 50-year storm, but essentially level the playing field for all developments. Right now, what we really do is if we have a conditional rezoning, we will ask for it to be a condition, but it's not a mandatory requirement. This would make this a mandatory requirement, so we're asking the board to consider that.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding item 24-657, I move that this board adopt the ordinance approving text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance of Union County, North Carolina, and adopt the consistency and reasonableness statement for approval.
Any discussion on Commissioner Williams' motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Vice Chair.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm obviously in support there. I mean, we have to make some requirements as it is now. We have really nothing of substance there in regards to stormwater, and so I think that this would be at least a good start for the county. Thank you.
Any further discussion on Commissioner Williams' motion? All in favor of the motion indicate by aye.
Aye.
I'll now recognize County Manager Brian Matthews for his comments.
The only comment I'd like to make is I want to say thank you on behalf of the staff, for the board to consider the retirement insurance. I do think that is a wonderful tool to help recruit and retain employees. It does provide equity as far as our benefits for all the staff, and I really do appreciate the board considering that, and I think your employees will be very pleased. Thank you very much.
I want to thank the board as well for that and for considering that. Of course, I want to thank all the county employees and our staff for all the good work they do. Appreciate the Sheriff's Department always being here with us, and EMS, fire, and emergency 911. We couldn't do without all those people. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Vice Chairman Helms.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll say thank you to Ms. Burrows and also Ms. Nance that came and spoke during informal comments. Certainly appreciate your participation. Again, I want to thank our staff too. Obviously, I mentioned this earlier, but Van and his group, with all the effort that they've done on that reappraisal, again, is impressive to me. Don't know how they do it, but, you know, kudos to those folks. Great job to, obviously, Beverly. Thank you for looking into, you know, the benefit discussion. I think that that's helpful that we consider these things. And to our planning department, you know, you guys really give us some good things to look at, and I certainly appreciate that. So with that, again, thank you, and good night.
Commissioner Merrill.
I was not at the last meeting because I had the opportunity to go volunteer in Western North Carolina and serve about 600 meals with the North Carolina Troopers Association. I feel very honored that I had the opportunity to do that. I think, you know, me personally, I want to keep, you know, Western North Carolina in my thoughts and prayers, and I know that everyone here feels the exact same way. I will say being able to go in and see the damage that was done to our neighboring counties out west, it truly looks like a bomb went off. Got to go into Lake Lure and Chimney Rock. I could have never imagined that a hurricane, me growing up on the coast in eastern North Carolina and being conditioned and prepared for hurricanes, I could have never dreamed the damage and the death toll that has occurred in Western North Carolina. I want to especially thank our Union County Sheriff Office. I cannot remember how many trailer loads of donations and supplies that the Union County Sheriff Office delivered to Western North Carolina. I think it was around 18 trailer loads, maybe even more. So I especially want to recognize our Sheriff Department doing that, you know, from Union County to our neighboring counties in their time of need. Also, the church community, JARS, our municipal airports. I know that Goose Creek Airport and many others were doing the exact same, you know, flying donations in. You know, to this day, I don't know how they paid for all the fuel for all of the aircraft to do that, but as a Union County resident, I cannot tell you how proud I am to live in a county that is giving so much to people that have just lost everything. I apologize, but it's a nightmare, and if you haven't seen it, I would just encourage everyone. I just got back from Western North Carolina late last night from attending a funeral, but I would just, if you haven't been, I would encourage everyone, you know, to find some time. But I just want to thank the Sheriff Department, JARS, our local airports, and every constituent that donated to get supplies up there. I just want to say thank you.
Commissioner Williams.
No comments tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Balk.
Yes, sir. I'd like to, sort of a broken record here, but I really do want to say how much I appreciate the work of the staff, because I know there was a lot to bring to the table tonight. So, and with saying that, the only thing I have to add beyond that is I hope everyone has a nice evening.
Counselor Kay, you have any words for us?
I would like to again, congratulate Deputy Manager Nyland on his 5 years of service. That's all.
Thank you, sir. That concludes this regular meeting. Thank you for all those who attended. I move that the board adjourn. All those in favor indicate by aye.
Aye.
Thank you. He just got one.